being a monk for 7 years taught me a tremendous amount of gratitude, compassion, loving kindness that really helped shape me in the way I do things, I see things, learning the laws of impermanence, understanding impermanence. And everything doesn't last forever. There's always everything's constantly changing. When there's a birth, there's a death. Understanding those core teachings really helped me kind of understand how I move in life, and also understand like impacts that I have on other people. The way we speak, the way that we engage with one another.
Welcome to Love, Listings, and Legacy, where love, community, and building a lasting impact meet. We are Moni and Sophaline, a husband and wife real estate team, sharing our perspectives on life, real estate, and philanthropy, our stories about resilience and service. Join us each week as we share our journey of life, business, and giving back, all while building a legacy for our family and community. This is Love, Listings, and Legacy, where hearts, homes, and philanthropy come together. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Love, Listings, and Legacy. I am Sophaline Mao, and today I have a very special guest. He has been in our Cambodian American community for the longest time, and in today's episode, our guest today, we are going to explore themes of identity, spiritual growth, mental health, cultural legacy, and the evolution of service, from monkhood to fatherhood and food justice, which is what he does. And so today's guest, Prenz Sa-Ngoun. Hi, On. How are you? Chamrip Sup, On. So day cham thamai, sok sabai chia te.
Sok sabai wong, okun charan.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
Of course.
I am so honored that you are here today, Prenz, and I just was really thinking about, oh my God, what an honor. And this episode is going to be so heartwarming and inspiring. And I just can't wait. But before we get going, are you okay if I just kind of go through your bio real quick so the audience gets a feel of who you are?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Prenz Sa-Ngoun is a Khmer American, former Theravada Buddhist monk from Seattle, Washington. He was ordained as a monk for 7 years from 2012 until transitioning back to civilian life in 2019. During his time as a monk, he focused on bridging intergenerational gaps in Khmer culture, creating and sharing accessible resources about Buddhism, and advocated for mental health resources in public settings. He is now a father of 2 and professionally supports local food justice movements in the Great Seattle region. All right, everyone, let's give a warm welcome to Prenz. Yay! Did I do okay there with your bio?
You did great. Thank you.
And of course, everyone's going to learn so much more about you as we get into this episode on. So, before I get started, let's kick things off. Like, how was your Khmer New Year?
Oh my gosh. I think I went too hard. I'm a little sick, honestly. I got a minor cold from the Khmer New Year, and I think, we had beautiful weather the first weekend. And, we party all month long and celebrate all month long, but it's been nothing but amazing.
No, I feel you on that. I always tell people they're like, how many days is Khmer New Year? And I'm like, you know what? It's officially 3 days, which you'll explain to us in a little bit later in the episode. But, I was telling everybody, I'm like, we party all month.
All month long, in different settings, everywhere.
So, can you share with us, what did you and your family do this year?
Yeah, so this year, my family and I, we kind of took it a little easy. So as you mentioned, I do have 2 kids, and so they are very young kids. So it's sometimes a bit of a challenge to bring them in and have them sit for long periods of time at the temple. So this year we ended up going one of the first days we went to at the temple, and we went to listen to the monks chant and get blessed. We did all the kind of activities of Khmer New Year. Unfortunately, Seattle weather is not like Cali weather. So we couldn't, spray each other with water or shaving cream or anything like that. But it was still fun. We had the Saiko Chika, I think is the very popular food. We had lumpon, the waffles, just so many other great food. It was so great to connect with people. I hadn't seen people in some people I hadn't seen before the pandemic, and it was great to reconnect with a lot of folks. So yeah, it was amazing.
That is awesome. And then is there a family tradition or any favorite memories of of Khmer New Year that you especially have that you're okay to share with us?
Yeah, I don't have any particular favorite memory, but it's always a family tradition to get together.
Absolutely.
And so I'm very grateful and fortunate that my entire family, we all live in Washington still. And so it's very accessible for us to get together for Khmer New Year's. But that is the one thing that we always do every year is we have, at least for one day in the month, we get together as a family and we celebrate Khmer New Year's. Of course, we get together outside of Khmer New Year's, but for Khmer New Year's, it's just special.
Yeah, and I so agree with you on that. I mean, my experience, I just think about living in Cambodia for those years that I lived in Phnom Penh. And it's funny you mentioned family. Everyone goes back to their ancestral village. And it's funny, my family's actually from Phnom Penh. So Khmer New Year, we don't have any countries. We don't have an ancestral village because our ancestors are literally from Phnom Penh. And so we end up just hanging out in the city and there's no traffic. And so anyway, it's quiet. It's quiet. You could drive across town in no time. It is so quiet. But anyway, I love what you mentioned about family. And that's something I'm hoping we could get into a little bit later as we dive into our episode today. But no, that's amazing. Well, one thing is I wanted you to kind of share with the audience a little bit about yourself. I read your bio. You grew up in the Seattle, Washington area. But, before we get into what inspired you to become a Buddhist monk, Prenz, can you share with us, what was your childhood like and how did your family arrive in the U.S.?
Yeah, so both my parents, they actually didn't know each other before migrating here to the U.S. And so they met each other here. My mom migrated here in 1982 and my dad around the same time. And they met each other in a very well-known to Khmer people here in Seattle called Holly Park. It's a neighborhood here. And they got married and they had siblings and I. And so that was kind of how my family migrated here and kind of the makeup of my family. And the way I grew up, what I think is very common across other Khmer American families and Khmer American kids is that I grew up here. I was born and raised here in Seattle, Washington, in America. And I went to just public school. And so I was fortunate enough to go to a public school where it was very diverse. I lived in a very diverse neighborhood. So I grew up nearby, so many different cultures here in Seattle, and I got to kind of mix it with those. And so I know there's, a lot of the stories where you go to school and you don't always feel Khmer. But the one thing for me as a Khmer American kid, my parents always kept me around Khmer culture.
Yeah.
Whether it's my dad, bumping some Cincy Vanille or some other Khmer artists, at the time. He was, my dad's also from Oklahoma, Jay, so he listened to a lot of Southern music.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I had all of that growing up, and my parents, they put me in dance classes and everything. And so I was always surrounded by my culture. Unfortunately, I didn't speak Khmer at all. My parents spoke Khmer to me, but I never had the chance. When I was younger, I didn't have a chance to really learn Khmer as much as I probably should have, even though my parents tried their best to. But I speak Khmer now, so.
I was going to say your Khmer is so fluent. So when did you start to learn Khmer?
So I actually learned Khmer. I think, my mom always says Khmer was my first language.
Right, right.
But, really, it didn't feel like that. But I actually learned Khmer. I learned how to speak, or I guess I started speaking Khmer when I became a monk in Cambodia. Wow. And so, I ordained as a Buddhist monk And probably within three to 6 months, I started speaking Khmer. And yeah, and I mean, it was helpful that the temple that I was staying at, no one spoke English. I didn't speak Khmer, so I was down to, really catch on.
Wow. Now, did you get ordained here in the U.S. Or was this in Cambodia?
I got ordained in Cambodia in my dad's hometown in Khmer. And so,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, ordained over there, spent 2 years in Cambodia and then 5 years here in Washington.
So you were an ordained monk for 7 years, it sounds like. For 7 years. That's incredible. Now, are you also literate in Khmer or just verbally fluent?
I can both speak, read, and write in Khmer.
That is incredible. So I am so envious because I can speak Khmer. I just can't read or write. But I can, when I lived in Cambodia, and I actually faked it a lot. People actually, they thought I could read Khmer.
It's tough. It's really tough. I mean, and I think like that's the one thing I'm sure we'll probably get into later, but like even a lot of our Khmer elders don't know how to read and write too.
Right. Right.
So like, it's a big thing. And I feel very, very honored and grateful to be able to learn how to read and write in Khmer. Obviously I was forced because I was a monk and I went to school as a monk. And so I had to learn that pretty quickly in order to kind of fit in with everybody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I'm sure everyone listening is wondering, well, what inspired you to enter monkhood? And, when, I guess, was there a pivotal moment in your life that kind of, pushed you that way? Or was it a calling? If you could share with us, that would be amazing.
Yeah. I think when everybody asks me this question, I think a lot of people assume that it's going to be like a kind of a fairy tale type story. But actually my influence was not very positive. I mean, it was positive in a way, but so it kind of started with my older brother. He's almost about 10 years older than me. When he was a teenager, he got into a lot of trouble. And so he wasn't the greatest kid. He was kind of in and out of juvie. And so one day my mom was like, all right, that's it. We gotta do something. So he ended up taking a trip to Cambodia to ordain as a Buddhist monk. When he was a teenager, and he was a monk for 2 years.
Wow!
And fun facts: we actually left him there.
Oh! Oh my God! Wait, so he got ordained before you did, or
he got ordained before I did?
Okay.
And so he was a teenager. I was probably I must have been, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old.
Wow.
Maybe a little bit older. I can't remember, but I just remember he was a monk and, for a little bit of time. And so we'd always call him every month to just check up on him. But the deal was that he would have to, get his GED in Cambodia and then he would be able to come back to America.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, so that's an aspect of it, of kind of the influence. Another influence is, I wasn't as bad, but I was, kind of getting it all along the path. And someone was like, all right, we got to snip this in the butt. And so when I was in middle school, she had me ordained as a Buddhist monk for a couple of weeks here in Washington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, and my mom, she's always been a temple lady. She's always been around the temple. She's always going there for something. And so me being the youngest of 4, I was with her. I was constantly with her. And I was always around the temple. I was always around the monks. And so I was always interested in the robes, and everything. The incense sticks, the smells of the incense,
Yeah.
And so all of that kind of was an influence to me. And then after the 3 weeks that I was ordained, my mom was like, do you want to do this for longer? I'm like, yeah, I kind of did, I was like, it's kind of interesting. And so she offered to set me up with a monk in Cambodia, a very famous monk. His name is Venerable Sankeret.
Oh,
he's very well known for his Dhamma talks in Cambodia. And so my mom was like, what do you think about going there for spring break? for like, just for a couple of months, spring break until like summer. And this was in middle school. This was like in the middle of 7th or 8th grade. And I was like, sure, why not? And so off I went to Cambodia.
Wow.
Ordained as a monk.
Oh my gosh. And do you remember what city in Cambodia were you ordained in, or where when you went back?
Yeah, so I originally ordained in Odaminche, in a village called Atakau. And so this is like very close, northern part of Cambodia, very close to the Thai border.
Right.
This is not the village of my dad, but it was nearby, next to the village my dad was originally born from. And so I spent a little bit of time there, and then I was moved to a temple in Phnom Penh. And so I lived at Wat Patum.
Oh yeah.
Wat Patum in Phnom Penh.
Oh my gosh.
Spent a little time there, and then moved down south a little bit, probably like by half an hour to the Chibampo Viespo area.
Yeah.
And so I lived at Wat Viespo for another year and went to school there.
Oh my gosh, how amazing. Well, yeah, when I lived in Phnom Penh, Wat Patum was always just right there. And actually my father grew up near Wat Patum back in the, before the Khmer Rouge. So a lot of our relatives lived in that area of Wat Patum.
Yeah.
And then Chibampo, of course, like south of Phnom Penh. Chibampo now is completely like, it's so developed. It's South Phnom Penh now, and it's just crazy to see the growth. But I love that. And what year were you in Cambodia?
I think it was between 2012 and 2014 or 15.
Yeah. Okay.
And I remember it because the year that I left was they were just in construction for the first mall there.
Yeah, the Eon.
I think it was like Eon. Yeah. Sa Eon.
Sa Eon. Sa Tamip Eon.
Sa Tamip. And so
they called it.
Yeah. So I remember like Cambodia was just getting like really developed.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, and the reason I asked is I was just trying to figure out, I think as you lived there several years before I moved there. And if you recall, I moved to Singapore in 2016. And so I was in Singapore for 2 years. And then, so I didn't move to Phnom Penh until 2018. And then I was there just during the pandemic and came back in late 2020. But when I left, they actually were constructing Eon Mai. So they had Eon 3. And so Eon 1, when you were there, that was the start of these. Yes, it was the start. And that was probably the first like Psadam Nope. And then Eon 2, Sain Sok, and then Eon 3, and then Chipmung Mall, and all these huge shopping malls, and then there's community malls. But I don't know when the last time you were in Cambodia, but we were there. My husband and I were there in 2023 for our honeymoon, and it's completely like, it's so different.
Yeah, last time I was there was 2019, so it's been a really long time since I've been there.
Yeah, not too long. It was like a little bit before the pandemic. Yeah, well, that's so cool. Well, the thing is, like, a lot of our fellow, Cambodian Americans, right? Either they've gone back to visit, or maybe some have not gone back. Some maybe went, really young. And I wanted to just kind of like have you share your perspective, because many times, for us, if we haven't gone back, we usually see these images or conjure up these images of Cambodia based on what our parents told us growing up. And, as all of us here, April 17th, 1975, it's been 50 years. And I just wanted to kind of maybe get your thoughts on like your parents or your elders, your family members, for us I'm a 1.5er. So for me, 50 years is significant because I look at 5 decades of us being here as a community, of surviving, of thriving. Some of us are still healing. Some of us are trying to, make sense of what this life is like as Cambodian Americans. But can you share with us like just your thoughts on like 50 years and how your family has kind of progressed from that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's funny because I think last year I invested in some new like camera gear, and the reason why was because I wanted to document my life. I wanted to document my life because I always loved documenting. And so the first thing I did was when I got the new gear, I asked my parents if they'd be open to doing a series of like interviews with me, and just to talk about their life. And so I had these questions and I'd ask them, just kind of about their upbringing and what it was like. And there was a lot of hesitation, to talk about the Khmer Rouge, to talk about that era, because I think it was so painful. And as I'm talking to them, you can tell that they haven't fully healed yet. And in all honesty, how do you really fully heal from genocide?
Yeah.
From surviving genocide? Not only themselves, but the trauma that's passed down to their kids, me, to their grandkids, my kids, and so our community. So I think there is a tremendous amount of healing that is happening in community. And I think there is a tremendous amount of also activism that is happening in community. And now that we see kind of this new generation of Khmer folks, Khmer Americans, it's amazing to see how proud they are to be Khmer.
Mm-hmm.
Given the history that we have as our people, of what happened to our people by our people, it is amazing to see how prideful that we can be as Khmer people, even the younger generation. And so I think it's amazing how far our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors have come to be able to provide us such a culture, such an immense gratitude of a culture, and to be able to allow us to thrive, to feel confident, to feel brave, to be resilient in what we do and how we practice our culture and how we show up in the world. I am constantly amazed by everybody in our community, young and old, and it's just amazing to see. And so while we continue to recognize the atrocities that happened, in 1975 and 1979, it is amazing to see how far we've also come. And also not to mention that genocide, I think when I talk to a lot of non-Khmer people, a lot of people think genocide was a historical thing. And while it was, there's still genocides that are happening till this day.
Yeah.
The Palestinian genocide, the other genocides that are happening around the world, it's still happening till this day.
Yeah.
And as Khmer people back then, and probably now, we felt unheard. Mm-hmm. And there's many other cultures, other communities across the world that are experiencing genocide that we, as Khmer people that have survived that, we can continue showing up for those communities.
Absolutely. And just so beautifully said with such compassion on. And I too agree with you. I think our elders, it's hard for them to talk about it. When you ask them to formally talk about it, they really are hesitant because it just re-triggers a lot of the hurt and the pain and the suffering and the grief. But I found it interesting that when they do kind of relax and they get together, they do tell stories, and they'd always talk about like, oh, I was in this labor camp in Battambang. Oh, you were there, or I was here. And so I feel like they do kind of have that shared background. And I, even just as a little girl, I remember when my parents used to have friends over, after dinner when everything's kind of put away, they just hang out, and then they talk about, samay popot, right? Like, oh, where was I? And, who did I lose and how did I get out? So you always hear those stories. But I think, going back to what you said about our generation, like for me, we're actually not that far removed. Your parents are direct survivors. And for me, I'm part of the 1.5. If my parents didn't make it to Kawidang when they did, I would have probably been born in a Pol Pot, labor camp, Khmer Rouge labor camp in Battambang. My husband, he was a child, and he remembered living in those child labor camps and fighting for food as a child and not having enough to eat and learning how to steal food just to survive. And so I think our community has come a long way. I feel like there's still a lot of issues that came with it, especially coming here and obviously being very socioeconomically disadvantaged, right? Like we all got thrown in the hood. Like you get to America, you're just kind of everywhere until you find that community. So I think for your family, Seattle, Washington, became your community. And funny enough, Owen, I don't know if I ever shared with you, but Seattle was actually where we first landed after.
Oh, no way.
Yes. We landed in Seattle. Yeah. In December 1980. And my father was a former national police officer, and we had Look Van Saw.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So my dad worked for him. He was one of his officers. And I think Look Van Saw was one of his commanding officers. And once my dad got to Khmer Rouge, Look Van Saw had put out a note of hey, if any of my officers are alive, write to me, tell me, your badge number, tell me where you serve, whatever. And so my dad wrote to Look Van Saw, and my dad was like, yeah, I have a wife. And, we just delivered our first, baby girl, was me. And sure enough, so Look Van Saw helped us. He was actually one of our sponsors, and he helped, bring our family to Seattle. And then my parents just felt it too cold. So they were like, oh, let us know. They're like, oh, yeah. Oh, they're like, oh, I'm like the jet they didn't know. And so anyway, but, so we eventually, ended up in Stockton, California. And part of the reason is because of the Khmer community. And as we kind of talk about your journey, with, being a Buddhist monk and how that kind of helped you. One of the things I wanted to share with you was that, the Stockton Khmer community, actually the temple, Wat Tamararam Buddhist temple, started in the 80s. And I remember going there as a little girl, and that was a place of healing. In the early 80s, if you remember, 1985, a lot of us as refugees only came here for 5 years. But, the Buddhist temple was a place of healing. It was where our, parents went to football and monk school and honor, the people who died during the genocide, right? So anyway, but, I share that with you because as we talk about Buddhism, for our Khmer community, especially for me growing up, just like you, Own, I grew up as a temple kid. Every Chochanam, Bon Paka, all that stuff. My mom and my parents were very, very religious. And so I grew up knowing how to Khmer Mangom. I knew how to Dakbat. I know how to, sit and pray and Mangskol and, Satu, all the stuff that your parents teach you. My parents always taught me hey, this is, you're honoring your grandfather who died during Khmer Rouge or your aunts and uncles. And so I always knew going to the temple was going to a special place because that's where our relatives in heaven, that's how I understood it. So, as we kind of switch back to kind of your journey with Buddhism, maybe can you share how did Buddhism help you understand healing and suffering and compassion, within our community and understanding what we went through? Could you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, of course. I think, and as you're talking, I'm kind of just rethinking about, my experience and also just the things that I'm still experiencing till this day, now that I have kids too. I think as a Buddhist monk, it was interesting because my perspective was a lot different from the other monks that I was around, because obviously I came from, America. I wasn't born in Cambodia. I was definitely more privileged. I was coming from a place of privilege to be around other monks who did not have the same privilege.
Sure.
And so I think there was a lot of a lot of differences in perspectives that I experienced, but I think there was a lot of teachings that I gained that I didn't know the impacts it had until I experienced them. And even till this day, as a civilian, there's many experiences that I have that I'm like, oh, like, this is what I remember when I was a monk, or like, because I was a monk, I am in this way. And being a monk, it's very different from being a civilian. And so, I experienced a lot of, just like how to be calm. And it wasn't like, there wasn't a class that was like, how to be calm 101 or anything like that.
Be zen or how to
there wasn't like a how to be zen. There wasn't a how to be how to meditate class 101. Like, there are, of course, meditation retreats and stuff like that, but there's never a course that tells you like, this is how you need to be. You have training rules and stuff to follow. And I think that is kind of what sculpted me. Being around other monks, being around senior monks that have been monks for 15, 20, 30 years. And it's really a personality that you gain. It's not just something that you grab. It's not like an accessory. It's a way of life. And I carry that with me till this day. As a way of life, and learning the laws of impermanence, learning the understanding impermanence, and everything doesn't last forever. Everything's constantly changing. When there's a birth, there's a death. Understanding those core teachings really helped me kind of understand how I move in life, and also understand like impacts that I have on other people. The way we speak, the way that we engage with one another. These are all things that really shaped how I look at healing, how I look at trauma, because after being a monk, the way that I interacted with elders was much different than had I not been a monk. I see that, because I lived in temples with elders. I see that the way they engage, and I see how young people engage, and it's very different, right? And so, I think it's just like being a monk for 7 years taught me a tremendous amount of gratitude, compassion, loving kindness, that really helped shape me in the way I do things, I see things.
Yeah, well, no, that sounds so beautiful and calming, and absolutely, I agree. I think understanding the laws of impermanence, just the principles of Buddhism, which I hope you'll share with us in a little bit. But do you see that the Buddhist principles kind of like come into how like our diaspora, like say for example, like our elders, do you kind of see that in your experience, like like our elders when they go to the temple? Obviously, many of them have suffered traumatic losses from losing family members or even children, or even them themselves being tortured during the Khmer Rouge. Like, what has your experience been? I mean, obviously in Cambodia and in the US as a monk, like, can you share?
Yeah. I think you kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think, the history of Khmer temples, of Khmer Buddhism and Khmer temples here in America, it really was generated from what you just said. Just like the yearn for healing, the yearn for culture, the yearn for guidance. It was the temples. And so while, the migration happened in, late 70s, early 80s, there was no temples. As you mentioned, like in Stockton, like, that's probably all the first temples in the US, and also in Philadelphia as well.
Yeah.
In Washington, Amachakaram was the first temple here in Washington State, and that was, in 82.
Wow.
And a lot of temples started off as small houses.
Yeah.
And it started by a number of community members coming together to pitch in to find a house where they can rent and house monks.
Yeah.
And again, like, during the Khmer Rouge, there was no monks.
No.
Because they were all destroyed. They were all destroyed, like forcibly destroyed. And so, the during that time, when folks migrated back here to America, it was the community that brought it back together because they knew that Buddhism would help heal them. It was a place of belonging, a place of community, and that's why we have such strong communities now. Is because of Buddhism. I think Buddhism was and is still a guide for us, and it's still a healing resource for us. And so, whenever you feel down, or you feel that you need just an extra push, like the temple is always going to be there.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing to see the amount of resources people can put together in order to have the temples that we do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Owen. I mean, I think even for my family, every year on my dad's anniversary of his passing, we always go and mang skol for dad, basically, do the offerings for him as a way of remembering him and honoring him, and that, our good deeds will somehow go to him and help him on his next journey. But I also see the temple as a place now for the younger generation to get to know Khmer culture, especially Khmer New Year, as we just saw last week. The temple, I mean, at least at what Theravada Buddhist temple in Stockton, I mean, it was packed. It was packed. It was just,
it's always had the biggest crowd over
Stockton.
there.
Yeah, T09. That's why I'm like, what Stockton, and what Lodi, and this past weekend, what Modesto, what Fresno. So I feel like the communities have come together and now I see the temple as, yes, it's a place of religious worship and healing for our elders. And but I also see it as a place for our community to celebrate and to gather. And even if it's just like going to get like Khmer beef sticks or bok lahong or, lot cha, tio, whatever it is, it's a place for us to gather and get food. As we're kind of talking about, the next generation, you yourself, I see you as a bridge. I see you as a human bridge in connecting our culture between the different generations. And so I wanted to maybe throw it over to you, Onan, and just see, what has your experience been working with intergenerational Khmer communities? Obviously, any of the challenges, any of the gaps that you've seen, particularly on language. So we'd love to hear a lot more from you about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me, working in that space, because I was a monk, and I still do this work now, but like prior to returning to a civilian. The biggest challenge for me was working with elders because of their trauma, because of everything they experienced.
Wow.
So for me, a lot of the times when I brought up new ideas of how to engage with youth or how to bring in more people to the temple, or the things that I thought monks, we had an opportunity to do in the community here in America, a lot of those things were shut down. Like a lot of those ideas were like disapproved, and I was always looked at as like, you're a young monk from America. You don't know the culture like we do. You have no idea. You're not a real monk. Like, these are the comments that I received from elders. Yeah. These are the comments that I received from the people, that I lived with. And while it was hurtful, I understood where they were coming from. And so I tried my hardest to treat, each comment and each approach with compassion, because I understood where they were coming from. Like, this is, it's almost as if someone was trying to come in and like steal their culture or like change their culture. And it's not what I wanted to do at all. However, we are in America, and I think, truth be told, like my culture in America now looks very different from Khmer culture in Cambodia.
Yes.
And it might look even different, just in Canada or in France or in other countries. And so Khmer culture can look very different, and we can still be Khmer at the same time.
Right.
And so, the biggest thing for me was trying to understand that, and also helping the older generation understand that, they're dying. They're a dying generation right now. And I don't say that with any disrespect. I say that with all compassion and loving kindness. And just to really say, like, we as the younger generation want to learn from them. We want to learn as much as we can, because as you know, a lot of our culture and history is through oral preservation.
Right. It
is a huge challenge for this next generation to learn everything we possibly can to keep culture the way it is, or even the richness it is, without that connection to older generations. And this is why I say, like, all generations, all Khmer people, we all want the same thing. Our approaches are just a little different. And I think there just needs to be some recognition in that. And also just some more just leeway for each other. But I think, again, like, my people, no matter the age, my people are always so strong and passionate about their culture. And that's the one thing that I always love.
Absolutely. No, you like are so accurate about that. I think that sometimes we love it so much. We try to preserve the authenticity of it, right? But also having to be a little bit adaptable with kind of how we maintain that authenticity, but also be with the times. And I really love how you said it. And yes, it's all with loving kindness. There's no disrespect intended at all. But, if the culture, the language, if the dances, the food, all of that, if we want to maintain that own, I agree with you. Our elders have to be a bit more understanding that we did grow up in the US, right? So we are bicultural. And for us as a Golden Khmer, when we ask them questions about, how do you cook this dish? Or instead of saying you're not going to do it right or whatever, they have to be more willing to pass it on. And I love what you said about our history being an oral history, because even when I was in graduate school trying to do research on Khmer history or Khmer culture, it was so hard to find literary works that I could cite in my research, because a lot of it was just, and then so I had to just cite my parents.
Yeah. I mean, that's what a lot of people end up doing anyways, right?
Cite someone,
You just got to cite someone that has that knowledge and just experience.
Lived experience. And so
you can't find that.
Yeah. And that's why I love what you were saying about, you had invested on this camera gear. And that's why I think social media the past few years, it's been phenomenal seeing this renaissance of Cambodian creators, from Cambodia to Cambodian Americans to Cambodian Australians and Cambodians in Europe. I feel like social media has become this platform to share, and just like this podcast that my husband and I wanted to do, and why, we have legacy in the title of the podcast on, because I don't have children of my own that I could pass this knowledge and experience and culture to. So for me, I was thinking about, well, what's going to outlive me? When we go back to the principles of impermanence, you and I, we're not here forever. We're here for a finite amount of time. And while we're here, what is the impact that we want to have on the world? And so, as my husband and I, we started talking about it, his sons are 28, 29 years old. They're adults, right? And so my stepsons are adults. And so I'm like, okay, well, what can I do besides, having my own offspring? What can I do to share? And that's why this podcast came about on. And it was inspired truly just by lived life experiences that Bong Moni, my husband, and I, we wanted to share, whether it was the failures we've gone through, whether it's, a lot of it is about real estate on the surface, but if you dig under that, it's about creating homes. It's about creating communities. It's about home ownership. It's about building generational wealth. It's about leaving something for your children after you're gone. And so that was one of the things that really inspired us. And that's why when you agreed to be on the podcast, I was over the moon. I was oh my gosh, because you have such a unique experience being an ordained monk and have lived in Cambodia. I don't have that own. That is an experience that you have that's so special. that you could like share with our next generation? Yeah. So anyway, I say that because I'm so inspired by everyone now and how they're using social media. Yes. So yeah,
we live in an era of documentation.
Yes.
And I am so happy many of us are taking advantage of that, because we need to, this is the best way to preserve our history. Right. This is the best way to preserve our culture. Right. You know, and so as we know, like during the Khmer Rouge, a lot of our knowledge was burned. Yeah. A lot of it was destroyed. And so, you know, we need to, this is the best way to preserve our current knowledge. So, yeah. And I encourage everyone really is to continue asking questions and continue, you know, kind of pushing boundaries with your parents or your grandparents or elders, and saying, like, you gave a perfect example of just like wanting to learn, you know, how to cook something from your elder, and they say, no, you don't know how to do it. Like, you don't do it right. I'm gonna do it.
I'll just do it for you.
I'm here to learn from you. So can you teach me, please? Because I want to learn how to do this myself. And I want, like, that's what I find a lot with my parents and a lot of elders in our community is I have to verbally, and again, like I do this because I'm comfortable, because I can speak my, and so I completely recognize for those who may not speak my, it could be completely different, or may just not be comfortable being in that space.
Sure.
But I highly, highly encourage everybody to ask your elders and just ask them to teach you. And if they give you pushback, you got to give them a little pushback too. Yeah. Just like, no, this is the way we preserve our culture. If you want to preserve your culture with us, please allow us to learn from you.
Yeah.
And this is the thing.
No, it's so beautiful. And I think even like this, you know, ever since I've been married, one of the things that I really find great joy in is Khmer New Year and like the Theravada Buddhist to welcome the New Year angel. And that's something that I do own. And like I said, we don't have little ones, but I do it for the big ones. You know, I do it for my stepsons, and we invite, right? We do it for everybody. We invite our non-Cambodian neighbors and friends and community members. And they're like, what is this? And why is there all this fruit? And I said, you know, like Christmas Eve when you leave milk and cookies out for Santa. It's like, but when you explain it that way, they're like, oh, yeah. I was like, well, you know how Santa goes to all the good little boys and girls, you know, Christmas morning, giving them presents. I was like, with, you know, reindeer. I said, well, in Khmer culture, we have Theravada Nam Thamai. I said, we have we have Theravada. I said, we have a goddess. You know, I said, there's a goddess who comes and she descends down, and you're supposed to like welcome her so that she comes into your home and she brings you abundance and blessings and happiness and joy. And you put out all this stuff, and then you leave it out for 3 days, and then you just get together, and everybody that thought they would, you know, the whole family has to be together. And then, and you know what? Like, it was so much fun this year. Oh, and I just want to say, like, this year, because Theravada Achtam Thamai was 4:48 a.m. Cambodia time. So when I did the conversion, it actually ended up being like it was like Sunday afternoon for us here on West Coast time. And on Sunday, we went to the temple. So we went to like Rabbat and do all the Pun From Sak. We did everything in the temple. And I told everybody, I was like, by 2 p.m., everyone needs to be at my house. And so Moni and I hosted everybody. We had food, we had everybody on. But I made sure, I was like, you better be on time, because Theravada Achtam Thamai is on time. I was like, she's not on Cambodian time. I was like, she's on time.
She's not coming 2 hours late.
Yeah, coming 2 hours late, saying she's on her way. I was like, no. And so it was so funny. But anyway, I tell you that because I was so like passionate about it, but it made my family excited. And so my brother's, okay, yeah, we gotta get, and we put all the fruit out and everything. And we played like the music and Panpiet music and everything. And so anyway, now it's become like every year, and we invited our non-Cambodian friends. Anyways, I tell you that because you have to make it fun. You have to make it engaging. And then I also made my mom explain to me like, oh, okay, you know, perfume. You got to put some cosmetics for things, but when she come down, you know, she gonna freshen up herself, you know, and all that stuff. But anyway, I wanted to kind of like share that with you because I wanted to segue into like how you have been devoting your efforts and skills in creating accessible resources about faith and culture. And I don't know if you want to share, but I did a little snooping. Obviously, I see that you have ceremonial services, and you were also offering private Khmer New Year tours. And I was like, OMG, that is genius. That is genius, because you can give people a curated personal experience, right? And the reason why I think it's genius, because, for example, my husband, Bong Moni, he said growing up, he didn't know why they went to the temple, and his parents couldn't explain to him, like, why do you do almsgiving? Why do you not mad? Why do you have to like bang skull? Like nobody took the time to explain to him. And so he was saying, like, if there's a way that someone could explain this to this next generation, he's like, we could carry this stuff on. And so what sparked the idea and the inspiration with, is it Satu ceremonial services? Yeah. Can you share a little bit about that? That's so cool.
Yes, Satu ceremonial services is something I created. It was an idea that I had for a long time, even when I was a monk.
Wow.
And it actually started when I was a monk. It was an idea that I got just from being around so many ceremonies. There is, being a monk, you go to a lot of ceremonies. I've been to countless amount of funerals, countless amount of ceremonies, and the one biggest thing that I saw every time I was there was there was always an aja, there was always monks, there was always young people, there was always old people, but there was still a disconnect of knowledge. And even, older Khmer people, they thought it needed to be an aja. And that's not true. There doesn't need to be an aja. If someone is knowledgeable enough to lead the ceremony or to lead the same things that the aja would typically lead. The 5 precepts, asking the formal offer, invitation for Parata chanting, Sophaline, all of these things. And so I had this idea because I wanted, as you said, I wanted to create something that I wish I had when I was growing up. And I wanted to kind of fill a gap, fill a need. The one saddest thing that I saw during a funeral, during almost all the funerals that I've been to, was that there would be young people, there'd be kids, grandkids that would be going to these funerals of their loved ones that have passed on, and they didn't know how to mourn. They didn't know how to honor and pay respect in the traditional way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because they didn't want to. It was because no one taught them to. It was because no one translated everything that was happening. And so I wanted to create a service where it did all of that. One of the things that I focus on is on funerals. So I help conduct funerals in both Khmer and English.
Wow.
I'm the bridge between the temple, the aja, and the monks. And so I help coordinate all communication if anyone doesn't want to do and also funerals, it's a lot of work.
It is.
To be fair, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of emotional work.
It is.
Sometimes you don't have the emotional capacity, the mental capacity to take that on. This service that I created, it takes care of all of that. In addition to that, I also host workshops, both free and also other paid workshops. But also, I want to create opportunities for people to learn how to do this thing. Just like any other, job.
Right.
Well, most I guess community-focused jobs, you want to work yourself out of a job. And that's what I'm trying to do. I want to work myself out of this job. Well, it's not my full-time job. It's a side hustle. It's preservation. The real thing is preservation of the traditional knowledge and also Buddhist knowledge, because as you know, in the Khmer culture, there's a ton of Buddhist influence, but there's a lot of practices that we do at the temple that are not Buddhism, and it's just Khmer culture.
Right.
How do you know the difference? And if you don't know, then you don't know.
Right.
So I wanted to create something where people it's a trusted resource. It's something that you can always go to. And I wanted to create as many services as possible that people would really kind of tap into. I wanted to, the Khmer New Year thing was a great success. I wanted to make it really intimate so that folks can really spend time and ask all the questions that you could potentially ask or have, and continue to ask those things. And so my next thing right now is I'm actually writing a curriculum for a class, so that you can learn how to host your own ceremony.
Wow.
And it would be by cohorts. My idea is to have it a self-paced online class. Would have in-person versions as well. But after each cohort, the cohort as a kind of their last project, they would all work together to organize their own ceremony.
Wow.
As a collective. And so that's something that I'm working on right now and hoping to launch at the end of the year or next year.
Oh my God, that is incredible. And I'm thinking like I could see, that is consulting. That is consulting because you are sharing valuable knowledge that people want and need and that they don't have. And I agree with you on certain milestones in life. Like, when my father passed away, my mom was so overstricken with grief that she couldn't even do much because she was just overcome with grief. And so I, as the oldest daughter, had to kind of like take charge of like planning my father's funeral services, and luckily we had other elders like and aunties in the community that helped me because they were so knowledgeable with the ceremony because we wanted to honor him a true Buddhist ceremony. So we did one for 7 days straight for my father. But to your point though, if I didn't have them to guide me, I wouldn't even know. Besides like going to the temple, but you're right. There has to be like that. It's like a wedding planner, like a wedding coordinator. You have to have someone between you, the celebrant, and then your vendor, right? Like, so I think what you're doing is tremendous because you are carrying on and helping people to carry on those traditions, and I think even just on social media, like people, I feel like, oh my gosh, I think your content would totally, go viral because we want to know, if people could like go viral making like, chakrung, you could go viral telling people like, hey, like this is how you honor someone, like on the, this is like how you actually, if you really want to believe that your offerings are going to them, this is what you need to do. I feel like people don't know that. But I think that's amazing. And, what sparked me to reach out to you too was I saw one of your posts and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like Cambodian New Year. I was like, so many things that we don't know about, how we celebrate Jochtam as Khmer, right? Obviously there's different nearby countries, Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, other cultures that celebrate. But like, for example, like Bun Phnom Ksaik, like I was trying to explain it to even like my nephew. I'm like, so, are there any, just, if you could give us snippets, like any Cambodian New Year things that you think, like most common ones that people are like, why do we do that? Like any that you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, of course. And I want to say like the videos that I do on social media, it really started off when I was a monk. And I don't know if you remember, like a while ago, I did a bunch of videos with Halachley and like JL Jupiter and Baby Tsunami and so many other folks that I partner with and collaborate with, like those, and some of those videos did go viral. And like it started with those things. It started because I wanted to share the culture in a way that is accessible to people. Right. And so that's kind of how that all started, by the way. So shout out to all those people. Shout out to Keo with Easy Does It and everybody else. Thank you so much for making all that happen and making the culture, because, the one thing that I think that a lot of us forget or don't think about is that we're the current booze means owns, like we are them.
We are.
Like,
yes, we are.
We are. We're on like you see stuff.
Okay. I'm a yay. Okay. My husband has a grandson. We're yay now. Okay.
There you go. You're
we are.
Already.
We're grandparents.
So you're not even old anymore.
I got upgraded I got upgraded to yay. I'm a yay. Yep.
But yeah, so I mean, anyways, kind of back to your question about just like Khmer New Year's. I think there's a lot of traditions. Psych is like one of them. A lot of people are like, what is this thing? Like, what am I supposed to do with the sand? Like, there was a kid the other day that like his parents told him to do it and told him how to do it, and then the kid was like, I don't want such a sand. It's dirty.
Yeah, that's an American kid right there. That's my American kid. These kids.
I was like, but it was so funny, man. So like the Phnom site, like there's usually 5 sand dunes, right? Mm-hmm. The middle one is represented as the mountain, and where and it's in a different realm, Babatang, and it's where Buddha's hair and his diadem, like his crown, mm-hmm. is believed to be buried. Is at that mountain, and it's in a different realm. And then the other 4 sand dunes around it, they represent 4 of Buddha's chief disciples.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the reason why we put sand, like we sprinkle sand on top, is in Khmer culture, we believe that it's an act of giving, an act of gratitude, and so when you put the sand, it's like representing of building a temple, because the sand dunes are in the shape of a stupa.
Yes.
In Khmer, we call it Chet Dai. Mm-hmm. And so it is a stupa where in traditional Buddhism, like stupas are where you pay homage to Buddha, because those are usually where Buddhist relics are stored. Mm-hmm. And so it's a place where you pay homage in gratitude. And so that's kind of the brief story behind the sand dunes and why we do that during Khmer New Year's.
Wow. There's so many different renditions of that. That's why I was just like, I wanted to hear from you, obviously from the Buddhist monks' perspective, right? Because our elders, depending on how they were taught, it's like, it represents like your, you put all your sins in there and you say, okay, if you can count every grain of sand, then you can, whatever, like, so there's always these different renditions, but I love also to, can you also comment on like the last day, Srong Preh?
Yes.
I think so when we were in Cambodia and when I was there, what we would do, all the cousins, is we'd actually, bathe our elders. And so we would have all of my aunts and uncles, they'd all sit in a chair. And but in Cambodia, it is very hot. Kai buon, kai chai, like it's the dry season. And so they're like, yes. Pour water on me because it's so hot. So we got to do that every year. We got to, give them, chun like, like give them like a little bit of cash for New Year. And then we would, som kamato, ask for their forgiveness. And then we would bathe them, and then everyone just throws water.
Yes.
But yeah, could you maybe talk about Srong Preh and like why that's done on the last day of the new year?
Yes. So Srong Preh is the 3rd day, and as you mentioned, for our elders, is a representation of like when we were younger, they would used to bathe us, right? They would used to bathe us, and so in return, at the last day of the new year, which is the day where the calendar changes, right? This is from, for instance, this is from January 31st December 31st to January 1st, right? This is where the calendar and the new year changes. This is the day where we honor our elders, the current living elders, by bathing them as a representation of how they cared for us. And so the same way that we do with Buddha is like washing away our sins.
Yes.
Asking for forgiveness from our elders, asking for forgiveness from the Buddha, and also bathing him in a way to honor and respect, pay gratitude to the Buddha. By cleaning the Buddha, you are also cleaning your wellness. You're cleaning your intentions, setting new intentions for the new year in a purified way.
Wow. Yeah. It's always fun, especially at Wat Tamararam Buddhist Temple. We would wash all the statues on the grounds, and especially the large reclining Buddha statue, as well as all of the the ordained monks there, we would, but it just depends on like how cold like Jochnam is, because it didn't matter, because sometimes they're just like freezing out there and everyone's like throwing water. But I think it's such a beautiful tradition, and thank you so much for sharing a lot of those. And I feel like it's the one holiday I think just as Cambodian Americans, it's so special because obviously we have Thanksgiving and we have like Christmas and New Year's here, July 4th. I feel like being Khmer New Year is so special, and that's why I go all out. I go all out.
It's special to me because it is the one holiday in Khmer culture, no matter where you are in the world, it is the one holiday where everybody comes out.
Yeah.
It's everybody in the Khmer culture that come out. Like Kyuban is also like another big festival, but I feel like it doesn't have the same attendance as Khmer New Year's.
Right.
And so Khmer New Year's just makes it that much more special. And it's so great to see everybody and just like, celebrate the festivities, celebrate the new year, and just, honor and respect our elders and all the things that come with it. It's just so gratifying.
Yeah, I love what you said. It's like a reunion. You see your friends from high school that you haven't seen in like years, and you get to see everyone's like got kids. And for us, like we go with our grandson, and it's like, what? You're a yay. Like, I was like, blame my husband. I was like,
I went to the temple and I hadn't seen a lot of elders in a while, and some I hadn't seen since I was a monk. And so they're like, "What? You have 2 kids now already? Like, how did that happen?" I was like, I mean, it's been a while, but I have kids now. I got 2 kids, and it's just, it's amazing to see and catch up with everybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we're kind of, what I wanted to do is just also, just touch on, obviously, something that you've kind of been a part of, probably. I think probably being a Buddhist monk as well, as you mentioned earlier, that you've seen the suffering, you've seen, maybe I'm sure you've gone to ceremonies when people are in their darkest moments, having just lost a loved one, to maybe someone asking you to bless them on their wedding day, or maybe their housewarming and things like that. I wanted to kind of just, pivot towards like just kind of how you've use this spirituality in terms of like handling a lot of the mental health that is maybe within your own family or within yourself, or if there's any guidance or any insights that you have. Obviously I know the pandemic was really tough on a lot of people, very tough. And I also think that mental health is also something that is a bit of a taboo in our Khmer culture, because we don't want to have the stigma of it. And so what's your experience been in using spirituality as a modality for like dealing with mental health? And anything that you could share with us on that?
Don't shy away from healing yourself. Mm-hmm. Don't shy away from healing your generation or the next generation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we can't postpone our healing, because when we postpone our healing, it causes a lot of challenges for how we see ourselves, how we see our culture. And so take this opportunity, take right now. It only takes a couple of minutes to put away your phone, look at the sky, to put away your whatever you're doing, close your eyes, center yourself, and cultivate more mindfulness. Understanding yourself, understanding who you are, understanding your pain, understanding your struggles, understanding your successes, understanding where you're going. Take the time to be with yourself, recognize your own body, know your body, know what wellness feels like, know what wellness looks like. Take all the opportunity you possibly can to be the best person you can be, to be Khmer, to be who you are as a person. The opportunities right now, it's sitting right in front of us. It's looking right at us in the face. We just have to take this opportunity. It's tough. It's difficult. It's not easy, but never beat yourself up for trying to heal yourself, for trying to heal your generation, trying to heal the next generation. Don't ever beat yourself up for it. The pioneers of a culture, pioneers of any movement will always receive some sort of negativity. That's how you know you're doing something right. Mm-hmm. That's how you know that there's people looking, there's people witnessing the amazing things that you're doing. It is in this very moment that we are writing history with your camera, with your microphone, with your phone, with your children, with how you show up to the culture. We are writing history right now. You're part of history. Whether you like it or not, you are part of history. Yeah. And so we appreciate, every single person, every single thought, every single idea, every single minute that you meditate, every single second that you take to learn and embrace the Khmer culture. It is part of the history, and it will be known as the Khmer American history.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that was so beautiful. I was like, that's definitely going to be a soundbite we are going to use because, and just for myself, just dealing with my own, we talk about generational trauma, the daughter of refugees, the grandson of refugees, I feel like our whole healing journey is a communal healing journey. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if I can heal, that means another Khmer sister of mine is healing through her trauma and her things, and I feel like, having courage to face your skeletons and your trauma head on, that I think is going to be like life changing. And I've seen that with just friends in my life. And I love what you said about be the generation that breaks the cycle. Because it's, we always look at, the what is it, like the cycle of the dad comes home, kicks the kid kicks the dog, and then it's like this snowball effect of trauma. And I feel like, as a Khmer community owned, when I think back to how we grew up in the 80s and 90s and all the issues that we had with poverty and drugs and gang violence and alcoholism and domestic violence, it is coming from our trauma that we all got, and a lot of times, my husband and I, we talk about it because, he's very openly, he openly shares about like his childhood and being a child growing up in a domestic violence ridden home. And he talks about, he understands now. At the time, he didn't know why his parents were so violent to each other, but now he understands that they were suffering in silence. They were going through their own trauma, they were going through their own grief and pain, and coming here to America and like not knowing the language and not knowing how to guide your children, and like realizing, hey, this is better than starving in the Khmer Rouge era. So you kids just figure it out. It took him decades, until he was like almost 50 years old for him to actually find forgiveness. And that's something that Buddhism, we talk about forgiveness, and the forgiveness is like letting go. And, what is it? We say holding on to anger is like holding on to a hot coal, right? Like a burning coal. And wishing it's going to burn the other person, but it just burns ourselves. And so my husband, we talk about that. And what you just shared is so true. It's just, we have to have the courage to be that generation that breaks that cycle.
Yes.
If my parents grew up treating each other that way, well, you know what? I'm not going to talk to my spouse that way, and I'm not going to treat my children that way, because then they're going to teach that to their children. So yes, I feel inspired by our generation. I feel like now we are adults, and you said it earlier, we are the elders. We are the elders. Like, I have college students calling me Ming, auntie. That's because I am an auntie. I have a 20-year-old college student who's here from Cambodia. She's an international student owned, and I see her world through her eyes now as a 20-year-old. And I think back to myself like, wow, like if only, like, what if we had those resources when we were in our 20s, how did we end up? But, you are just amazing. I just want to say, and just so inspiring and so calming. And I feel like you need to have your own podcast.
Maybe I might.
That's
Maybe
something
I might. Who knows?
You need to, because I feel like your message it needs to be amplified, and that is your impact, and that is the service that you are going to give back. When you talk about karma, you talk about giving good karma. You need to put that stuff out there in the universe. And right now, we're going to share it with our universe, but you need your own podcast. So that's something that
okay, I'm gonna add that to the list.
I'm gonna be your first subscriber, because we need those tools. Because what you just shared is a tool. It's a tool, and especially if a lot of things about Buddhism and healing and forgiveness and loving kindness and compassion, if it's in Khmer, you're missing a whole generation who unfortunately they don't understand Khmer. Yeah. And I feel like you have such a wildly unique perspective being Khmer American, and that you understand Buddhism from the inside out. I feel like, anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox here about that, but I feel like, I think Prenz is due for a podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the gratitude, and
amazing.
I give so much thanks to all the just the community that continues to support each other. I get inspired by people like you, Long, and so many others that are doing such great, amazing things, seen and unseen. It's an inspiration to continue doing what I do. We continue to inspire each other.
Absolutely.
And we can be the snowball effect of healing.
Yeah.
We can be that. And it's just amazing to continue to be invited to spaces like these and continue to share my story, because I'm always inspired every time I talk to you. I've known you for how long now? Over a decade.
Yeah, I think we met in UOP. I think you came with Petri, right? I think you came to UOP for the Rooted in Success. It was Khmer student, the Khmer Student Association at UOP. I think it was a little conference we did at UOP in Stockton. I feel like I remember, and I was like, oh, there's an ordained monk, and I didn't know how to address you. I was like, oh, look on. But you're so kind. But no, I've watched your journey, and I just, again, I'm just so inspired. I'm truly inspired as an elder, to you. I the young generation inspires me. Well, I wanted to also just really quickly, now that you life after monkhood and adjusting back to I guess you call it civilian life. It's kind of similar to people who come out of the military, right? Active duty.
Yeah.
So can you talk about now being a dad and what was that adjustment like for you back to the real world? How was that?
Oh my gosh. It took me a little while to adjust back to civilian lifestyle. I had to look for a job.
Yeah.
I had to, I didn't have to live on my own. Luckily, I had my parents still, so I had the chance to live with my parents still. But I had to look for a job, and thankfully, I worked for a food bank in Seattle that I actually coincidentally lived next to when I was a monk. And so it was my first and current job right now. I still work at the same place. And a lot of my work is in food justice and kind of local food systems, making sure that everybody has equitable access to food that is nutritious and also culturally relevant. And then being a dad, I have two little ones. I have a 3 and 1 year old.
Oh my God, so cute.
They're keeping me real busy. They just have their spring break, and so I took a week off of spring. I want to spend spring break and also give my wife a break. My wife, she's a stay-at-home mom, and so she is an amazing, partner in this entire journey of fatherhood and marriage and family. And so, we had the lovely opportunity of having 2 kids, and we're hoping to have more.
Oh my God!
The kids, they bring us so much joy, and it's amazing to watch my kids grow and also teach them, in a multicultural family. My wife is Japanese and, from Japan. So we had the opportunity to visit Japan, immerse them in the culture there. And so my kids are able to speak Japanese, English, a little bit of Khmer, and understand Khmer. And so it's amazing to raise them in that setting.
That is just so beautiful. And I've seen pictures, just on your Facebook, when you got married, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited for him. And now you're a dad of two.
I know.
That is so amazing. And I was going to say too, I wanted you to maybe touch on the food justice, because so here, obviously in California, we have nonprofit organizations. I'm on the board for a nonprofit called Tri-Valley Haven. We support survivors of domestic violence. And we also have a food pantry. It's a client choice food pantry because we believe in a dignified way for community members to come and get food that you said fits their family's dietary needs. It's culturally relevant. So, could you talk a little bit about just the mission of food justice and kind of how that came about, and anything you'd like to kind of mention about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, kind of how I started in this role, I've held two different positions in where I work now at the food bank that I work in. And my current position is more closely aligned with providing food access. But I think, one of the biggest things that we don't realize or recognize is that, food insecurity is so prevalent across America. Mm-hmm. And, you could have, people in your neighborhood that is experiencing food insecurity, but because, it's one of those things where there's such a huge stigma around, accessing food banks or food pantries, where a lot of people don't talk about their struggles. A lot of people don't talk about the food insecurity that they might be experiencing. And, again, this is part of the trauma.
Yeah.
Right? This is part of that trauma. And so I think, one of the biggest things that I try to do is kind of break down that stigma of accessing, tapping into food resources or any type of resource, because, everybody needs support. And, we definitely don't judge on who's coming to food banks. And we also try to provide things that are culturally relevant, because, an Asian community going into a food bank might not, eat some of the things that are there. Yeah. And we want to make sure that everybody has, food that speaks to them, that is relevant in their culture, that they eat in their culture, and provide them an opportunity to try new foods,
right?
And how to, offer ways on how to prepare those things. And so, I think food insecurity is so prevalent and it's not talked about enough. It goes hand in hand with so many other social injustices. And, food is medicine. Food is a way that we celebrate our culture. In my culture, we're always eating so much, but we're called skinny and fat at the same time.
It's a love language.
It's a love language. And so, food can be really, really healing. Food is a way of healing. And I'm always learning so much about food and just how different communities are addressing food insecurity in their own ways.
Oh my God, that is amazing work. And even here in our local communities, food insecurity is real. And especially when, we're serving a particular population that they've already gone through so much pain and just a lot, you know what I mean? Like to come and have to face this shame or this stigma, I think is really difficult. But no, your work is important, because food is nourishing, it is healing, and we all need it to thrive and to be our best selves and to show up for school, for work, for our families. So I love that. And, now every single guest that we've had to, we always obviously, we want to talk about legacy. And so I wanted to throw this over to you. What does legacy mean to Prenz? And now that you're a dad and having lived in Cambodia and done all the amazing things you have, what does legacy mean to you? And what do you hope to leave behind?
Legacy to me is continuing a culture that we can preserve. It is continuing a culture that my kids' kids can take, to take on and continue to celebrate, embrace. It's about, coming together as people, as Khmer people as a whole, or in your own communities as well, and really embracing the culture that you grew up in, that you identify yourself with. Legacy is about preserving your successes, your greatest achievements, and also where your challenges lie. So that way we know how to adapt and succeed in those ways. Legacy is really about giving everything you know that you can potentially learn and teach that to the next generation, to be the best that they can, to be the most loving person that they can, to be the most respectful and passionate person they can, so that way we can have just a much more peaceful world.
That is beautiful. And wow, what a legacy, Prenz. What a legacy that I know you're going to leave behind. Just the amazing work that you're doing with Satu ceremonial services, preserving the ceremonial, just authenticity and having people understand, and kind of like, in a way you said, like empowering people to like DIY, kind of like do your own ceremonies, because that's going to proliferate the practice, right? Because if you just hold all this knowledge to yourself, then what's the succession plan? How are you going to make sure that it gets, passed on to like one person, then they tell 10 people, then it goes to 100, and it just multiplies. But I absolutely love that. And, I feel like, oh my God, I just want to like keep you on here, but I know you gotta get to bed, and you got a family that's probably, up waiting for you. But, I just wanted to say thank you. And for our listeners who are just so inspired by you, how can they connect with you on social media? Like where can they find you?
Yes, it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Satu Ceremonial Services. That's SADHU Ceremonial Services. I'll be posting as many videos as I can, just teaching you about the culture, about Buddhism, Buddhist etiquette. And yeah, you can find me on social media there.
That is so amazing. And I'm going to actually link everyone in the show notes, and then also in our captions. We want to make sure that folks who want to learn more from you on and just want to connect with you, maybe follow you, I want to make sure that they have a way to find you, because the work that you're doing is so incredible. It's so unique. It's so needed. And I just, I don't know, I'm just at a loss for words, because I'm just so grateful that you took time out of, this Monday night with your family to be on here to record this podcast. But, I enjoyed every second of our conversation, and my heart is full. And I just want to wish you a happy New Year on, and Junpo, Chanam Thamay. May you and your family be blessed with peace, prosperity, happiness, and especially health in all the ways that you want to be healthy. And I really hope that whenever you get a chance to come to California, I really hope we can reconnect, or maybe my husband and I will come up to Seattle, Washington, and we might have to take one of your classes and learn from you, because we are the elders, we are grandparents. We want to make sure that our grandson, he's 5, like we want to make sure that he carries this on as well. One day after we're gone, we want to make sure that he understands his culture. And so, Akon-chan, on Prenz, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And yes, and everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Love, Listings, and Legacy with Sophaline Mao. I hope you found this episode to be inspiring by Prenz, and I hope you contact him or connect with him, however you'd like. But yeah, no, we thank you all so much. And thank you so much, everyone. Bye. Till next time. Thank you for joining Love, Listings, and Legacy this week. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Join us next time as we continue to navigate the path from adversity to success, one property and one purpose-driven decision at a time. Thanks for listening.